of being an academic, a leader at the center of government power, and now a student of Washington using both those tools, the academic and the practical. What I have learned since leaving the speakership is not reassuring. There are threats to America's future. Today, America is vulnerable to 5 threats that, taken collectively, are as daunting and difficult as any America has faced. 4 of them could undermine, even eliminate, America as we know it, while the 5th could leave us weakened, impoverished, and with much less freedom. The rising threats are, 1, that Islamic terrorists and rogue dictatorships will acquire and launch nuclear or biological weapons. 2, that God will be driven from American public life and reduces to the civilizational ennui that now characterizes a declining Europe. 3, that America will lose the patriotic sense of itself as a unique civilization. 4, that America's economic supremacy will yield to China and India because of failing schools and weakening scientific and technological leadership. And 5, that an aging America's demands on Social Security, Medicare, and related government programs will collapse the system. These 5 threats are real and dangerous. If they are not met and solved, they will cripple our nation. Each threat can be overcome, but standing in our way is an entrenched political system and news media that refuse to confront these threats seriously. Who we are, who our opponents are. Traditional politics is dominated by and defined by a collection of elites who are deeply opposed to the solutions America needs to renew its civilization and ensure its economic and national security interests. These elites want a dramatically different world from the values and aspirations of most Americans. Consider just a few examples of the chasm that exists between the two sides. Most of us believe that 9/11 was enough proof that we have enemies who hate us and who would kill millions of Americans if given the chance. Yet our national security bureaucracies continue to operate within a peacetime model. Our liberal national security elites believe that we should defend America only within the framework of an ineffective United Nations and the approval of a skeptical Europe. Most of us believe that America was founded as a nation in which people are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that we rightly pledge allegiance to one nation under God. But an arrogant judiciary increasingly tries to drive God from public life. Most of us believe that America is a good and decent country, created by heroes worth studying. But the schools that teach young Americans and American immigrants offer politically correct, multicultural drivel, fail to teach American history, and ridicule what little they are forced to teach. Over the last 4 decades, America has been divided into these 2 camps. In the first are those elites who find it acceptable to drive God out of public life, and who in general also scorn American history, support economic regulation over freedom and competition, favor a, quote, sophisticated foreign policy led by the United Nations, and agree with the New York Times. But Americans in the other camp, who are proud of our history, know how integral God is to understanding American exceptionalism, know how vital the creative and competitive spirit is to being American, and believe that America is worth defending even if it irritates foreigners who do not share our values. In Samuel Huntington's book, Who Are We? The Challenges to America's National Identity, he points out that 85% of Americans are proud of their institutions. 78% believe children should be allowed to pray in school, and 87% take pride in their work. Only 23% of Americans believe the United Nations should play a leading role in world affairs and have countries defer to its policies. Most of us believe in doing the hard work that will keep America's economy second to none. But our efforts are hampered by trial lawyers who seek their own enrichment instead of justice, by labor unions that insist on special deals and protection instead of competition, and by bureaucracies that emphasize process over achievement. Self-government implies that on these issues, the people should rule. But the liberal elite minority is winning and the popular majority is losing. Since the 1960s, the conservative majority has been intimidated, manipulated, and bullied by the liberal minority. The liberal elites who dominate academia, the courts, the press, and much of the government bureaucracy share an essentially European socialist value system. Yet they have set the terms of the debate, which is why politics as usual is a losing proposition for Americans. Politics as history. We need to replace politics as usual with politics as history, so that we focus on the long term, face facts, and act on them. In fact, this process has been the populist corrective action throughout American history. In the 1790s, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison founded a political party to wrest power from the aristocratic Federalists and enact populist change. In 1800, they won a decisive victory, and within 15 years, the Federalists had disappeared. One of the boldest acts of the Jeffersonians was to abolish the old judgeships and assert the right to correct the Supreme Court if it misinterpreted the Constitution, a fight that needs to be renewed. In 1824, American populists felt that the presidency had been stolen from their hero, General Andrew Jackson, by a collection of corrupt, rich Easterners. In a savage 4-year campaign, the populists destroyed the presidency of John Quincy Adams and swept the country for a Jacksonian majority. The Jacksonians reformed federal institutions and brought true grassroots democracy back to America. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision by the Supreme Court threatened to legalize the expansion of slavery. The new Republican Party, which had run its first presidential campaign in 1856, was energized by the opposition to this decision, and in 1860 it won the presidency. President Abraham Lincoln, who led the Republicans, was a genuine revolutionary. With courage and tenacity, he did what it took to restore a fractured Union and end the wrong of slavery. At the turn of the century, the Progressive Movement, a middle-class rebellion against political and corporate corruption, was led by Presidents Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. During the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal furthered the reform agenda and created a Democratic majority that dominated Congress until 1994. Throughout that entire period, the Republicans controlled the House of Representatives for only 4 years, while the Democrats controlled it for 58 years. During this time, modern liberalism dominated government policy, and the welfare state grew progressively larger. It was not until William F. Buckley, Jr., who founded National Review magazine in 1955, that the tide began to slowly turn. National Review was a lonely voice of conservatism in an overwhelmingly liberal establishment. Then in 1960, Senator Barry Goldwater wrote Conscience of a Conservative, a policy guidebook. This led to the draft Goldwater movement in 1962, the nomination of Goldwater in 1964, and the seizing of power by the conservatives from the moderate establishment within the Republican Party. Then came Ronald Reagan. In his speeches around the country for Goldwater, Ronald Reagan began many of his talks by saying, "I am going to speak of controversial things." The New York Times hated this and ridiculed the messenger. Reagan cheerfully persisted, and the audiences grew in enthusiasm and in size. People measured Reagan's values against the media's and decided Reagan was right. In 1966, he won the governorship of California in a landslide. For the next 14 years, Governor Reagan toured the country talking about basic values, about changing Washington rather than managing it, about defeating the Soviet Empire instead of seeking détente, and about cutting taxes instead of raising them. He understood politics as history and did not care about the petty, day-to-day maneuverings of legislators and reporters. He was focused on building a tidal wave that would change the debate and create a new agenda. When Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president in 1981, his commitment to change was an enormous shock to the elite media. They could accept a conservative campaigning on what they called red meat issues, but the candidate was supposed to understand that when he won, he was supposed to drop the big ideas and return to politics as usual. Instead,